it's Girls Camp.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Girls Camp podcast. I'm your host, Haley Rawl, and I'm joined today by the one and only John Parkinson Dehlin.
Hello, Haley.
Hi. I found out your middle name last night as I was researching you to make sure I had all the information straight.
That's it.
Are you named after anyone?
Well, my great whatever grandfather, Samuel Rose Parkinson, was one of the earliest sort of pioneer leaders in the church.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I didn't know that.
So,
and you are named after him.
Yeah, it's kind of my mom's maiden name.
Okay, cool. I wondered that because I'm like, that feels like a unique, well, it sounds like a last name. So there you go.
Yeah.
So happy you're here, John. Thank you.
My honor.
If you don't know John Dehlin, John is the founder and host of Mormon Stories, as well as board member of the Open Stories Foundation. I wanted to read your mission because as I was researching, I was like, oh, I love this. So the mission of the Open Stories Foundation is to promote understanding, healing, growth, and community for people experiencing or impacted by religious transition. I'm guessing most people know you and are very grateful for you and the work that you've done. And personally speaking, I was just talking about this a few days ago with some friends. And I was just saying, John Dehlin really did pave the way for the rest of us. So thank you for that.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I mean it. I really mean it. I feel like especially now that I'm doing podcasting, content in a similar field, I'm just like, oh, you were kind of the first domino of all of this. So now it's fun that I get to interview you.
Would you believe we're in our 21st year? So
No.
we have 20 years.
Insane.
And like 2,100 episodes of Mormon Stories podcast.
So crazy. 21 years. I mean, we were just talking. It's a demanding job, as I've learned myself, and I'm not even pumping out content at the rate you are, but I know it's just, I hear from people all the time of how helpful you are. So thank you. And I'm very excited about what we're doing today because my friend Lucy Hutchins, she has a Patreon podcast and she invited me on. I was assuming we would probably talk about faith stuff. And she was like, actually, I want to talk about everything but Mormonism. And she said, we're not even allowed to say the M word. And I've been wanting to interview you, John, for some time. And I didn't know what angle I wanted to take or how I wanted to approach it. I had that conversation with my friend Lucy. It was so much fun. And I'll link that in the show notes, by the way. But I was like, I want to do this with John Dehlin. So we'll see. The Mormons might not believe that Girls Camp podcast and Mormon Stories podcast can have a whole podcast episode and not talk about Mormonism. But we're going to try.
Let's do it.
I'm
excited.
I'm super excited.
Yeah.
I have tons of questions for you. I do have maybe a couple questions towards the end where we might cheat a little bit. Mormonism might come into play, but for the most part, we're just going to get to know John Dehlin outside of Mormon Stories.
Fun.
Yeah.
Hope it's not boring.
I don't think it will be at all. One thing I actually wanted to ask you before I dive into the prepared questions is, how do you like being interviewed as opposed to interviewing?
I am so much more comfortable asking the questions than
Really?
answering them.
Oh,
Yeah.
that actually intrigues me because I feel opposite. Even though I interview a lot, when someone's interviewing me, it's like feels like such a break. So that's funny.
Yeah, but I also do feel like, man, I've shared 10,000 hours now of people sharing their stories. Like,
Yeah.
I would like to, say a few things here and there.
Absolutely.
So I still like it.
Yeah. It's a very different part of your brain, I feel like, when you're the one being interviewed.
If I don't like it, it's because I worry maybe I'm not funny. Maybe I'm not interesting. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, worry not. Okay. I genuinely can't wait. Writing these questions down, I was like, oh my gosh, I do feel like I know a lot about you, but not some of these things. So the first question, and I feel like this is a very good question to get to know somebody. What are your top 3 favorite movies?
All right. Well, have you ever heard of the name Frank Capra before?
It sounds vaguely familiar.
So Frank Capra was a director in the 1930s and 40s, a Hollywood director.
Yeah.
But you will have for sure heard of his most famous movie. His most famous movie is It's a Wonderful Life.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so that stars Jimmy Stewart, and it's that Christmas classic. That's definitely one of my favorite movies. But there are 2 other movies that Frank Capra directed in addition to It's a Wonderful Life. One is called Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. And I first saw it at BYU.
No way.
When your grandpa was a professor there,
Yeah.
by the way.
Shout out Steve Walker.
Yeah, who Steve Walker was my wife Margie's favorite professor.
Fun. Small world.
Yeah. He did Bible is Lit and like Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien, Christian fantasy.
Very cool
as a BYU
stuff.
prof. Anyway, while I was at BYU, I saw this movie. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. It's about this idealistic sort of Boy Scout leader who, again, it's Jimmy Stewart. So just like Wes Anderson now always has Bill Murray in every movie, Frank Capra always had Jimmy Stewart in pretty much every movie. Not everyone, but almost everyone. And so same dude, different name. It's basically about this idealistic Boy Scout leader who's elected senator in sort of a freakish state of events. And then he goes back to Washington, D.C. to work in Congress, and he discovers how corrupt it is.
Ooh.
And then tries to lead a movement to kind of clean up Washington, D.C. But it's totally black and white.
Yeah.
This is like in the 30s and 40s. And it's just a totally gripping, even today. Again, I saw it when I was probably a freshman or sophomore at BYU. Gripping, passionate, interesting, funny movie. Just like It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah, I'm adding it to my list. I'm intrigued.
I think you'll love it. We should do maybe we should do like a Lost and Found Club movie night.
Yes,
where we
absolutely.
maybe Chelsea Homer can
Yes.
jump on that. I think people will love it, but it also just calls out the corruption of Washington, D.C. politics. And then, and there's a famous scene where the Jimmy Stewart character decides he's going to do a 24-hour filibuster. And he does this multi-day filibuster, just like the senator
Cory Booker, right? Yeah.
did. So that was a callback. That Cory Booker filibuster was a callback to the Jimmy Stewart, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington
Very
filibuster.
Cool. Okay, cool.
It's a great performance. So we'll say that's my second favorite movie in addition to It's a Wonderful Life. The third is probably the most influential that shaped my life. It's a movie called You Can't Take It With You. And it's also directed by Frank Capra, and it's also starring Jimmy Stewart. In this version, it's about this rich young son of a banker who falls in love with the secretary whose dad used to be a rich, successful businessman, but instead the dad, or the grandfather of the family, quits his lucrative job and just retires at the peak of his success. And he is sort of the patriarch over this home where everyone in the family only does what they want to do. So one of his daughters just dances as a ballerina all throughout the day, and she'll, come on to set pirouetting and dancing as a ballerina as she's setting the table. And there are these crazy uncles that are always testing fireworks and setting off fireworks. And, other members of the family doing really silly, weird things. It's kind of hysterical, but there's a really deep meaning in it because the movie kind of gets across the message that you can't take it with you, that life is short. If you spend all your time trying to make money, you're going to make a bunch of money, but have an empty life. And then what are you going to do with the money when you die?
Yeah.
And I saw that movie also in this theater and film 117 class at BYU. And it really hit me hard in my soul. It's just life is more important than just making a bunch of money. Mm-hmm. So as I plan my career, I'm not going to orient my goals on how much money I can make, how much power I could assemble. Mm-hmm. I have to have a profession that I can sort of feel good about, enjoy, and hopefully make the world a better place.
Yeah, gives you meaning as well. Yeah.
And so even though I went to work at Bain and then Arthur Andersen and then Microsoft and even MIT, that whole 12, 15-year stretch of me working at some of the top companies in the world, I was always thinking, well, this is just temporary because someday I'm going to find what I was meant to do.
And do you feel like you did?
I did, and I won't
Good.
say the M word, but
Stories.
But ultimately, I left Microsoft, which is a different M word. I left Microsoft to become what I've become today, all driven by that movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I swear to you, it's an old movie. It's black and white. It holds up, and it's really inspirational.
Ooh, okay. I cannot wait to watch it. I was, as I was writing these questions, I'm like, I wonder what kind of movies John likes. And that feels very fitting. Frank Capra. I'm excited to dive into that. And I love how I do think movies can really have a huge impact on life, like you said. So I love hearing that it did. And I also learned when I was researching you to get my info right for the intro, I didn't even realize that 15-year stint in your career before you started the podcast. So yeah, that's a really interesting piece of your journey that I'm not sure how many people even know that.
Yeah, I was in high tech.
Yeah.
And it was really helpful because when I started the podcast back in 2005, you had to know HTML, you had to know RSS, you had to know audio and video editing. And having a 10, 12-year career in tech made the burdens or the obstacles to starting a technical podcast a lot less fearful to me.
Yeah, and I bet, when you started in 2005, it was probably so different then, because I even felt like there's a huge learning curve with tech, but probably much less so than there was in 2005.
Really quickly, I know I just mentioned some movies. There's one other movie I have to mention.
Please.
It's called A Man for All Seasons. And it probably is my favorite movie of all time, but it didn't fit the Frank Capra theme. But just really quickly, Henry VIII?
Yes.
It's a play adapted into a movie. Orson Welles plays Henry VIII, kind of an older Orson Welles. But basically, it's about King Henry VIII wanting to get rid of his first wife so that he can marry a second wife and have a son. And he wants to get this influential man named Sir Thomas More on board because all his subjects really respect Sir Thomas More, who's a religious man. And if he can get Sir Thomas More to endorse his putting away of his first wife as a Catholic to marry a second wife, then he thinks the public will go along with it.
I see.
And it's basically about a man who is ultimately executed because he wouldn't cave to the pressure of King Henry VIII. And it ends with this dramatic trial, and he's ultimately executed. That's probably my favorite movie of all time. And for me, again, I saw that at BYU in this theater and film class. In my mind, it sort of set into my mind that if I'm ever trying to do something that I really believe in, but then the powers that be try and get me to stop, I'm going to stick to my principles, even if it means I'm in effect, executed.
Mm-hmm. Wild.
Or
another ex.
Or another, excommunicated.
Yeah.
So that movie, you can't take it with you. Again, it's like a Broadway play turned into a movie. Super powerful, and I highly recommend it.
Wow, sounds like a very good film class at BYU too.
It was life-changing. I loved my time at BYU.
I bet. Was that film class, did you opt into that, or was that just like
an elective? It was like a humanities elective.
Just kind of for fun.
Yeah.
I wish I took a film class. Dang it.
Everyone should take a film class.
Everyone should take a film class. I wish I did.
Yeah.
Love that. Love how much that all connects. That's kind of a cool full circle thing too, that you learned that at BYU and then it kind of played out in the way it has.
Yeah. And even Rushmore from Wes Anderson. I don't know if you've seen a lot of Wes Anderson movies.
I have not seen Rushmore though.
It was the movie Rushmore that I saw at Microsoft that really pushed me over the edge to leave Microsoft and do what I've done.
Oh my gosh, cool. Okay, now I have a whole list.
By Wes Anderson. Yeah.
Cool. We all have a list and let's get lost and found on it. Sort of similarly, but different. What is your favorite book? Or you can have, maybe there's a couple, but favorite book.
I thought about listing a couple. A book that really changed my life. Again, I was assigned in an honors colloquium class at BYU. And the book was called The Autobiography of Malcolm X. Have you ever heard of this book before?
I have not, no.
So it was my favorite book for a couple of reasons. If you were growing up, let's just say in the 70s and 80s when I was growing up, you might not have heard of Malcolm X because the Spike Lee movie hadn't come out of yet. You probably would have heard of Martin Luther King Jr., the civil rights great leader. But if you had heard of Malcolm X, like in the textbooks, it would have been sort of him mentioned in contrast to Martin Luther King. And it basically would have said, back in the 60s, there was some racism, and Martin Luther King Jr. would have fought for peaceful sort of like civil rights for African Americans. But then there was this bad, other black civil rights leader named Malcolm X who advocated for violent inaction of civil rights.
I even remember kind of internalizing a little bit of that. Yeah, in my education. Yeah.
So that's all I knew. And even in high school, I saw that in the textbook, and I'm like, wow, Martin Luther King Jr., good, Malcolm X, bad. Well, here I am at BYU, the Lord's University, as a sophomore now. I'm a returned missionary. And my honors colloquium class assigns me the book, The Autobiography of Malcolm X, written by Alex Haley, who was also the author of this book, Roots, which was about African slavery. So I'm reading this book about Malcolm X, and it just is blowing my mind because, number one, it just talks about the injustices that Black people were experiencing in the 50s and 60s, the lynchings, the murders, the segregation, the injustices, the torture, like horrible, horrible things. And once you really get a sense for how bad African Americans were treated in the United States, then all of a sudden you think, well, why wouldn't they be violent, But still, even then, it talks about this character named Malcolm Little, who was raised, I think, primarily in like Boston, how eventually he becomes a criminal because of the poverty he experienced. And eventually he ends up in prison. And while he's in prison, he learns about this prophet, this Black prophet named Elijah Muhammad. And Elijah Muhammad had a church or religion called the Nation of Islam. So basically, he starts learning about this prophet. He starts following Islam, and eventually he cleans up his act. He becomes very moral. He ends up getting out of prison, starts dressing nice, and starts living a moral, chaste life, gets married, has kids, and then starts advocating for civil rights. And he wasn't advocating for violence. He was advocating for civil rights. He just did it from a voice of power. And he would say things like, by any means necessary, and he would use strong rhetoric, but I would argue that strong rhetoric was justified and
warranted.
Even required.
Mm-hmm.
And if you study the civil rights movement of the 60s, you'll find that there was sort of a carrot and a stick dynamic going on between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King represented the good cop, but in some ways Malcolm X's rhetoric represented the harsher, cop, where it's like, we could do this peacefully, or we could have a little bit more of a rough conversation. And in that way, I would say Malcolm X was instrumental in motivating white America to sort of enact the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
Ooh, very cool. Yeah,
but he's also charismatic and funny and passionate, and then mind blown. And I don't mean to sort of give a spoiler, but eventually, as he's investigating the prophet of the Nation of Islam, lo and behold, what does he discover? He discovers that Elijah Muhammad had taken several young girls to be his plural wives.
Really?
And then he has a falling out with Elijah Muhammad. And then, lo and behold, he's eventually assassinated by the Nation of Islam for breaking off and for telling people publicly that the Elijah Muhammad was a polygamist.
Wow.
So you can imagine as I'm learning about my own tradition.
Yeah, the polygamous stuff.
To see those parallels between Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam and other faith traditions.
Oh my gosh, all while at BYU again. Okay, cool. That sounds like a very interesting book. I mean, I know the broad strokes, of course, of Malcolm X, but yeah, I feel like as far as history goes as well, really delving into the stories, the narratives, I'm like, okay, now I want to get in there. Whereas learning history by just names and facts and dates doesn't quite do the same thing.
And if you don't like reading, Spike Lee did a movie based on the autobiography with Denzel Washington playing the role of Malcolm X. My favorite book of all time. is East of Eden by Jonathan Steinbeck. It's just a classic, life-changing book.
Phenomenal
and it's got
book.
that quote that people often have as a tattoo when they've left, their religious tradition, which says, "And now that I don't have to be perfect, I can be good."
Yeah.
So anyway.
And John Steinbeck writing is
Are you a fan?
so good. I am. I mean, I've read East of Eden. I read Grapes of Wrath when I was in high school. And I think that was one of the first books I read where I really felt, I had read a lot of things up until that point, but when you're in high school and you're starting to kind of get into literature, and yeah, Grapes of Wrath really hit me. Very beautiful writing, but also accessible. East of Eden, I need to read it again. It's a big one. It's kind of a thick book.
Also, the original two brothers in East of Eden are modeled after Cain and Abel in the Old Testament.
Yes.
So there's a lot of really, really profound religious themes in East of Eden.
This was a selfish thing for me to do because now I just have my list of movies and books to read next. Okay, where do you want to most go in the world that you haven't yet been?
Because I worked for MIT and Microsoft, I've probably been to 40 countries.
40, wow.
So India, Singapore, Malaysia, Taiwan, Hong Kong, England, Switzerland, France, Germany. Been to a lot of countries. So, again, some of my favorite countries are like Vienna, Austria, love Italy.
What did you love about Austria?
The song Vienna is my favorite Billy Joel song. But Vienna, Austria is just, it's kind of where one of the cradles of the Renaissance, whether it's, I think Bach, Beethoven, Tchaikovsky, it seems like all of that really profound classical music that inspired a lot of my young adult and adult years came out of Vienna. Mm-hmm. A lot of, modern science came out of Austria and Vienna, and it's just a beautiful town.
I've never been to Vienna, actually. I've only been to Salzburg. So I haven't been to Vienna. I would love to go.
I
do love Austria, though. Because my mission was in Germany, so the language and things like that. But I do feel like, there's something. Austria also feels underrated. I feel like not, at least for people in the United States, I don't feel like a lot of people, that's like a top travel destination. But yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah. And Florence is amazing. I've been to Florence, Italy, where the David is, and Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci did their thing. I think where I want to go is South America. So I've never been south of Guatemala or Mexico. So I've never been to Argentina. I've never been to Chile. I've never been to Brazil. Have you been to South America?
I actually haven't, because my sister, she went on her mission in Chile. So my dad and stepmom went to pick her up there, and she would love to go back, but it's just really crazy expensive.
It's long.
But it would be fun to go back with her, especially. She was in Viña del Mar, which is like a gorgeous coastal place.
Do you know the history of that?
I don't.
So without using the M word, when I was on my mission, the Viña del Mar mission was the number one baptizing mission in the world.
Wait, where was your mission?
Guatemala.
Okay.
And they were baptizing over 1,000 people a month in Viña del Mar.
1,000.
And
oh my gosh.
It was all fraud.
Wait, I'm kind of remembering this because my sister told me that so much of her mission, almost everyone she ran into was like baptized at some point, and oftentimes they didn't even know they were baptized. So it was a totally different task as a missionary.
No, they have, there's like 5% activity rates in Chile because and the baptisms in Chile, Viña del Mar, were often beach party baptisms. So the I haven't used the M word yet. So the missionaries would go onto the beach and, just pull youth together.
Just everyone
and then just baptize them
on down.
Same day in the ocean and have 10, 20 baptisms a day.
Oh, wow.
Without discussions. And anyway, it was a real problem.
Were you learning about that when you were in
Guatemala?
Guatemala?
Yeah, because my mission president was like, we got to compete.
He's like, come on, we got
1,000. We were doing 750, 800 a month.
Oh my gosh.
And he was like, come on, we got to step it up and beat Chile Viña del Mar.
Oh my gosh. And the competitiveness, that is really interesting to know. I hadn't thought about it in such a long time, but I do remember my sister telling me that, it was mostly about inactivity because people had been baptized. It must have stemmed from then.
Yeah.
Okay. So South America is next on your list.
Yeah. The food, the culture, the art, and I studied a little bit about like government overthrows in Chile. I was a political science major, so I studied about the overthrows of governments in like Argentina and Chile, and American subversive activities with the CIA, and it's all interesting stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. Well, excited to see when you make it over there.
Okay.
My next question is, what would you be doing if you weren't doing Mormon stories?
I think I would do a talk show. Long before I ever got into podcasting, I loved Radio West with Doug Fabrizio. I loved Larry King on Larry King Live. He got me too, but I loved Charlie Rose. I always loved like Meet the Press with Tim Russert, or This Week with David Brinkley, and then it was This Week with Cokie Robertson, Sam Donaldson, and now it's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. But like, I love talk shows. I've always loved talk shows. I even loved Rush Limbaugh, before and up to BYU. Just hearing people's stories, hearing conversations has just always lit me up. And if I wasn't a talk show person, I would be like a Ken Burns documentary maker.
Okay, cool.
Because I've always loved documentaries.
Yeah,
as well.
so basically storytelling, but just in a little bit of a different method.
I've always loved it.
Ooh, a documentary would be really cool. You could make a really cool documentary.
It would be fun. If any documentary filmmakers are
seriously,
out there, let's make a doc.
I'm sure there are. I might even tell my husband Bentley. Cool. Yeah, I like that. It's related, but different.
Yeah.
Were those talk shows, those were all mostly radio, right? First, and then you're watching on TV? Like, is there any element of...
Yeah, for sure. Larry King was radio and Rush Limbaugh was radio. But Larry King was an early, talk show on CNN. And then Charlie Rose was on PBS.
And a lot of that is live, right?
Yeah.
Live scares me. You do live a lot.
Yeah.
I know. I don't need to be scared of it. There's just something comforting about knowing, just in case I say something stupid, I can edit it out. But I should try live.
Do you do your own editing?
I do.
See, I was going to say you're married to an editor, but you do your own.
No,
So.
he taught me. He did teach me. But I'm very... I could outsource it at this point, but I need to talk about that with my therapist about letting that one go, because I hate editing, but it's just like, you know how it goes.
I did it for 15 years.
Yeah.
I did my own editing.
It's hard, especially with editing. It's hard to relinquish that control for sure.
Yeah. Anyway, I love talk shows and docs.
My next question is, what is your biggest piece of parenting advice?
Ooh, parenting.
John Dehlin, the dad.
Man. So a story that I kind of tell sometimes is the story where even though, let's just say my religious faith had changed considerably by the time our kids come around, I was still very I'm really working hard not to use any improper words. I was still very conservative in my morality. What happened was I had a child who I won't name because I don't have the permission to, who just wanted to do typical teen exploration of like kissing boys or dating boys or sneaking out late at night or even, do what normal kids do as they're exploring, as we discussed on my episode with you when you were in high school. And because I was so intense about standards, about purity standards and that sort of thing, I created an environment where my kid was just afraid to ever be open and honest with me about what they were experiencing. And without going into too much of that story, that kid got into a situation where they weren't safe and they weren't comfortable telling me, calling us. And it led to them experiencing some very significant harm in their life. Mm-hmm. What I learned from that experience was the most important thing you want from your kids is that they feel comfortable telling you everything. In other words, what you're going for in your parenting is connection, not control. Now, of course, when they're little, you don't want them running across the street or playing on the stove. So you have to keep them physically safe. But what you're optimizing for isn't obedience, isn't fear, isn't control. It's that they would feel so safe that they would tell you everything.
Yeah.
There are so many reasons why connection trumps control. And the author that Margie and I kind of got this idea reinforced for us is Shefali Tsabari, Tsabari. She basically takes secular Buddhism and has several books on parenting.
Oh, that's very
Out
good
of
to know.
Control, The Enlightened Family, I believe it's called. There's several books that she's released.
I'm very excited to look into that because I'm a bit parenting book adverse. They usually end up just stressing me out, I feel like. And I mean, I have 3-year-olds, so it's kind of a different thing right now. However, I'm reading a book by Thich Nhat Hanh right now. You Are Here. Anyway, so that sounds right up my alley.
Totally.
And like very much in line with what I feel like my budding philosophy on parenthood is. So
yeah. It's the Awakened Family.
Okay.
Out of Control.
And I can look that up and I'll link it all.
Shefali Tsabari.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. I think that's the journey of especially people post high demand religion and post having these really, I grew up with certain standards in place that were kind of imposed upon us. And now that I'm raising my kids in such a different way, it feels a bit like the wild, wild west in some good ways, but in some very scary ways. So hearing that perspective of prioritizing connection feels good because I hope that is the journey that I'm on as a parent.
Yeah. Yeah. If your kid tries alcohol, if your kid tries marijuana, if your kid has sex or is pregnant or whatever, what you want is them telling you about it and allowing you to be a part of that experience. Embrace it.
This is an off the script question, so I didn't prepare you for this one, but I'm curious with being a parent and also having a psychology degree, because that was your PhD, how much, it's the question as old as time, kind of nature versus nurture, but I'm curious how much you feel like a child is just going to do what they're going to do anyway versus the parenting aspect of it.
1,000%. Like, we have kids that are just so different. Let's just say there are members of my family that use marijuana daily or that have used marijuana daily in their lives. And there are kids who have never tried it. You know what I mean? There are kids that, weren't really interested in dating all through high school or didn't date. And then there are others that were very active in dating as teens. And we taught the same thing
totally
to all our kids. So our philosophy, and this isn't original, instead of thinking of kids as like sculptures that you have to chip away from the wood or the rock as the creator to shape and form the kid, parents don't create who the kid becomes. Margie and I like to think of it as the seed. A parent plants the seed of the kid, and the seed is going to become whatever the seed's going to become. And
what
it's the parent's job to nurture the environment to allow the kid to become who they're going to become.
I love that. That's it's a lower pressure form of parenting.
For sure.
Yeah. And it sounds like a win-win all around.
Absolutely.
I love that. Thank you. Very helpful for me. And I'm excited to read those books. Okay. My next question is, did you do sports in high school?
Boy, did I. I think middle school is where, actually elementary school, I was super into sports. I was really tall, but I loved soccer. I loved baseball and t-ball. I played football. I did track. I did high jump. I did tennis. And
what about basketball?
Yeah, and basketball. So I did it all, and I loved all of it. And I was actually good at everything I did. So I was great at tennis, great at high jump, great at track, great at basketball, great at football.
When did you get tall? Were you tall?
Yeah, I was 6'4" as a freshman in high school.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and I was 6'6" by the time I was a sophomore.
Okay, gotcha.
But I started basketball relatively late. But
I'm sure the basketball team was like, "Come on over, John.
Yeah,
we'll take you."
Yeah. So by high school, I had to specialize, and so I did basketball. I played varsity basketball, in Katy, Texas, and I did high jump for the track team. And there was a point where I was mad at my basketball coach, so I tried out for the high school tennis team, and literally the tennis coach and the basketball coach got together and said, we're not going to let John play tennis because he needs to be playing basketball.
They sat around the round table of, the politics of high school sports. Okay, cool. I didn't know that about you either. Do you do sports at all anymore?
Yeah. So, Margie ran cross country for BYU.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And they were
very
a top
cool.
5 team nationally.
They still are very good, right?
Oh, they've won
I have
the
a
national
lot of
championship.
cousins who have gone through BYU cross country. That's cool about Margie. I didn't know that.
Margie was like a top national athlete. But yeah, I walk with Margie. I run with Margie. I lift weights. I lifted this morning. I love pickleball now. And I gave up basketball for about 20 years, largely because of church basketball. It got too violent and intense.
Dude, church basketball is crazy.
Yeah.
I need to write that down. I should do a whole deep dive on that on my Patreon.
There was one game, like a playoff game in Cache Valley. Cache Valley it's in northern Utah. It includes northern Utah, but also southern Idaho, kind of like the Franklin area. And it got so intense that fights broke out during the game. The game was ended by the referees before the game was over because it was so violent. And it wasn't us that were violent. It was these Idaho players. And then in the parking lot, they waited afterwards to fight us in the parking lot.
Like fist fight.
Yes. Like I was body slammed to the ground in the middle of the game.
Over church ball.
Yes, I won't say the M word, but like church basketball.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm just like, this isn't safe. So I gave up basketball for like 20 years. And it wasn't until my son, Winston, recently got into basketball that I started playing with him again.
Oh man, church ball. I had not thought about that in a while, but I was a big church ball girl myself.
Really?
Because, I played basketball up until 8th grade, I think it was. I was short. I wasn't all that good. And I liked soccer better, but I loved church ball. But it got intense. We had like drama amongst there was the other ward we were playing against. The moms were like getting upset. Anyway, that's a whole deep dive that needs to be done another day. Yeah. And there's a movie about it too. Church ball.
One other thing, just to kind of blow people's mind a tiny bit. I have a listener who plays basketball kind of in the Salt Lake Valley area. And he's been inviting me to church ball recently.
No way.
So on any given Thursday night at an undisclosed chapel somewhere
You're
in
playing church
Cottonwood
ball.
Heights area, I show up at 9 p.m., sometimes with my son Winston, and I play church basketball in a Mormon chapel with like 10 or 12 other guys.
I love that.
And none of them know who I am. None of them know who I am, which isn't surprising. Most Mormons don't.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's okay.
Gosh,
it's okay. You just can go incognito. They're probably just happy you're there and want you on their team.
Yeah. I'm just a tall dude named John that plays basketball.
They're like, I'll take him.
And weirdly, it makes me kind of miss church.
Oh, I bet.
Because just the fellowship.
I bet.
Of just cool people having fun together
Yeah.
and being nice to each other.
I mean, that's the best part of it, right? Is those activities, place to go. Yeah. I mean, a church gym, we have a family reunion coming up and it's in St. George. So we'll usually get keys to a church gym and play with the extended family. I'm like, I feel the same. There's on Sunday, I still find it a bit triggering, but any other day of the week, I'm like, yeah, I remember this. This was kind of nice. Yeah. Wow. John Dehlin playing church ball to this day.
In 2025. Thanks, Brett.
Heard it here first. Okay. My next question is, how would you describe your current beliefs framework?
One of my favorite quotes from Margie, my wife of all time, I was asking her, I did a long form interview with her, and I got to the point of asking her current beliefs. And, she said, beliefs are overrated.
Word.
And I totally agree. Because if let's just say, I've never identified as an atheist, right? But if someone identifies as an atheist, anyone who's a believer just shuts off their credibility or respect for that person. It's like, oh, they're an atheist, because atheist has come to be a bad word. Or even if I were to say humanist, like I just love humans and I care about the prosperity of humans. Well, religious people have denigrated the term secular humanist, like that's somehow bad and inferior and worth discrediting people. But then if you say, well, I'm still a believer in something in nature, well, then, maybe you're into woo or you're a sellout. I just find the whole framework of talking about beliefs as being polarizing, and I don't like it. And then even the term agnostic, all it means is you're not sure. And there are people that will claim they're sure about
lots
their
of
beliefs,
them, but
they're
are
not.
they really? Yeah.
They're not sure. And so like even the term agnostic, one, it's not understood, and two, it means nothing because everybody isn't sure. There's no one who's sure about things they believe, or it wouldn't be called belief. It'd be called science or knowledge.
Yeah, you can't really be.
So having said all that, if I had to say one thing I believe, it's, and this is a leap of faith, is that anything we do makes a difference. It's very easy to get into a framework of nihilism. Nothing matters. Nothing's important. We're all meat puppets. We're all just organisms that are going to live and die. The world is so problematic. Nothing matters. Why even bother? And it's all going to blow up someday anyway. So why bother? I think that's a place it's very easy to get to, especially in 2025.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially after deconstructing any sort of religious framework. Yeah.
Yeah. And so having said that, I still believe that what you do, what I do, what other people do makes a difference, can alleviate suffering, can help improve the state of humanity or state of the world. And that's literally an act of faith. So in that sense, I'm a person of faith.
Ooh, I love that. Yeah, that's a helpful thing for me right now because I also feel like I feel like I'm working through this thing right now which I guess I have been since starting my own podcast, but you realize that in helping others, you're also going to upset a lot of other people. You're going to trigger a lot of other people, and it becomes really difficult depending on, where you're focusing your energy. I'll find myself feeling like, okay, I'm trying to do something good, but it feels like I get a lot of responsive negativity or, I don't have to explain it all to you. And I think that, to your point, it is an act of faith to say, but I think it's worth it still, because I think even if it helps this small group of people or this one person, but especially when you're doing something publicly, can be hard to believe that for the nihilistic stuff you were mentioning, but also just because kind of anything you do publicly, you're going to get, I think, some degree of pushback. And that can be difficult to not take away from when you feel like, hopefully you are helping people.
Yeah. Amen.
Well, thank you.
And I'll
I
just
appreciate
say,
that.
I still love the teachings of Jesus. Be kind, forgive, serve others. So in that sense, I still very much consider myself Christian, but also I love secular Buddhism, which Thich Nhat Hanh exemplifies, but also Eckhart Tolle. Eckhart Tolle's book, A New Earth, was really instrumental for Margie and I in the 2007 time period of helping us create a new sense of meaning or purpose or spirituality. So I love secular Buddhism. And I'll end by saying this. I did feel inspired to start the work that I started 20 years ago. And I still see weird confluences or serendipities or coincidences that happen. And I even think that I don't know about energy in terms of like Reiki or energy work, but I do think there's just undeniably some organizing force or energy that we're all operating from or within, even to the point of being able to understand things without language many times, or influence that goes beyond what you can see in your immediate surroundings. And who knows where creativity and inspiration comes from. So I have not closed off the idea of there being something greater, an afterlife. If there is an afterlife, I'll be thrilled. So that's also why I don't call myself an atheist, because who knows?
Yeah. And you can hope for something, even if you're like, well, we'll see. Yeah, I think that there's a tendency to want labels for ourselves and for others, especially if you're talking about, you're interviewing people and you're talking about beliefs, you're talking about religion. And I think there's something really liberating as people who identified so closely with beliefs for so long to not identify in that same way, and also to understand that things change. I feel like my journey, I'm changing all the time. And now that I'm getting more into secular Buddhism, I'm starting to see things differently and feeling a little bit more, they're, kind of what you're talking about with energy, some sort of unifying, connecting force. Reading more secular Buddhist texts, I'm kind of tapping into that a little bit more. And so it's nice just to feel like it can go where it needs to go. And I don't have to put my stake in the sand and stay there.
And also that like the greatest way to tap in to spirituality or meaning or connection is in the present moment, whether it's just paying attention to what's in front of you or just mindfulness, meditating, going into nature, feeling the presence of nature. That's spirituality to me now.
Absolutely. Do you get outside often?
Margie and I love to hike, up the canyon. We love, and just where we live, there's trees and birds, and we just
so nice to go walking.
I
was talking about
every day.
Yeah, I was talking about that with Bentley because Bentley is very outdoorsy. He loves camping. Long story. It's always kind of been a thing in our marriage because he's always like, let's go camping. And I'm like, that sounds really like a lot of work and cold and a bad night's sleep. But we were just talking last night and I was like, you know what? Let's just invest in some good gear and be a hiking and camping family because that reason.
This is girls' camp.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that ironic?
No, Margie and I really struggle camping too.
I know. But to your point, we just have such amazing access here in Utah. It's just like these mountains, especially this summer, I just keep looking at the mountains and being like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's just, there is something very spiritual about it. So,
not to mention southern Utah.
Yes.
And the Uintas.
Yes. Have you been to Kanab? I'm going to Kanab this weekend for my first time.
Yeah, fun.
I know. I've heard it's like an up and coming, I've been around that area, but yeah, it's like an up and coming spot. So I'm excited to be amongst the Red Rock.
People come from all over the world to come to Utah.
I know.
To check out
and who especially is Germans.
Yeah.
Anytime I'm in Zion National Park, Moab, that's the only time really that I hear German. And without fail, Yellowstone. Yeah. And I'm like, you've traveled across the world. Germans that I met on my mission had been to more places in Utah than I had been. Because
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, which is fun. I need to take more advantage.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Let's do a few more of these. Oh, this is a fun one. What is something you are a huge nerd about that not many people know?
I was trying to decide which ones to say. Margie and I love all superhero movies.
Really?
So
okay, that surprises me.
Spider-Man or the Marvel, we will always see the superhero movie, and that comes from my childhood. So we're not like, I didn't read the comic books growing up, but we're super nerds with superhero movies. I would say the sort of really geeky, nerdy thing is my mom introduced me to musical parodies or satire from a very young age. And what do I mean by that? Most people these days will know who Weird Al is. Mm-hmm. And I listened to Weird Al as a kid. I saw Weird Al in concert. In high school, I've seen Weird Al 2 or 3 times. I'm seeing him again. But Weird Al, it turns out, was inspired by these musician comedians. One's name was Tom Lear. He was a Harvard mathematician who published 3 albums of musical parodies starting in the 50s. So one of his famous songs is called The Elements. And he basically lists all the elements in the periodic table in order to one of the Gilbert and Sullivan tunes. So it's like, there's antimony, arsenic, aluminum, selenium, and hydrogen and oxygen and nitrogen, uranium, and nickel, neodymium, neptunium, germanium, and iron, americium, ruthenium, uranium. Anyway, that's a Gilbert and Sullivan tune.
That's a practical one, too.
Pirates of Penzance.
Now you know the periodic table.
Yeah, so that's a Tom Lear song. It's in Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul, one of the two. But Tom Lear is a really brilliant, funny entertainer. And then he was followed by an entertainer named Alan Sherman, who was this Jewish singer. His most famous song goes, "Hello, mother. Hello, father. Here I am at Camp Granada. Camp is very entertaining. And they say we'll have some fun if it stops raining." But it's all about going to summer camp. So girls camp themed. And how much he hated camping as a child.
Gotcha. Yeah, I've heard that one. I never knew where it came from.
That's Alan Sherman. And Weird Al always attributes his inspiration to Tom Lear and Alan Sherman.
Oh my gosh.
And then when I was a kid and at BYU, there was a radio show called Dr. Demento that on the radio would play just funny musical comedy satire.
Do you know Bo Burnham?
Yeah, I love Bo Burnham.
Okay,
yeah.
I feel like
fantastic.
The most modern iteration of that. And I should look into this because there's something about Bo Burnham that I love because it's that comedy element. It's the parody. Like even in the musicality, it's so funny, but also catchy and entertaining, and it can be informative. So I should dig back into, what did you call it? Musical satire?
Yeah.
I didn't even realize there was a whole rich genre behind all that.
There is. Like Tom Lear sings a song called The Vatican Rag, and he's basically making fun of Catholics. So it's like, and again, as a Mormon kid growing up, my seminary,
we should have done like I should have kept have a whiteboard. Then you would like owe me a soda.
Two or more?
Yeah, I think just two.
Growing up in my religious instruction, the Catholic Church was made fun of, and so Tom Lear has a song called "The Vatican Rag" where he makes fun of. It goes, "First you get down on your knees, fiddle with your rosaries, bow your head with great respect, and genuflect, genuflect, genuflect," and it's making fun of like Catholic ritual. Yeah, everybody say his own Kyrie eleison, doing the Vatican Rag, and he's playing like old time root beer rag piano as he's making fun of the Catholic Church.
And you're just like, heck yeah.
Yeah. Or Tom Lear just makes fun of Jews. Alan Sherman just makes fun of Jews. The entire, at least 6 of the 12 songs on his albums are making fun of Jewish culture.
Yeah. Oh, I'm excited to listen. That sounds like a whole thing to dive into. What's your favorite superhero movie? Back to the superhero thing. Do you have a favorite?
It's hard to beat the Dark Knight trilogy.
I was going to say, it's got to be Dark Knight, right? How did you feel about the newest Batman with Robert Pattinson?
Haven't loved it. I mean, it was great. It was good. I really enjoyed it.
It's a very different tone than the original Batman trilogy. The third one, right, where Bane is gets out of that's just really hard to beat.
But I grew up watching the Batman of the 60s. I was born in 69, but they did reruns. There was a whole Batman, prime time TV series, very campy, very funny. Have you ever seen
it? Was a TV show?
It was a TV show.
Oh, no, I've never heard of it.
Multiple seasons. And they would have the Penguin, the Riddler, the Catwoman, but all like in the 60s hip, you know that dancing like on, what's the Quentin Tarantino movie where John Travolta's doing this?
Pulp Fiction.
Pulp Fiction, like that style of dancing comes from a scene in a Batman movie, which was a Batman series, which is then reflecting kind of the dancing of the 60s.
Oh, no way.
But it was called the Bat 2C. But anyway, you can go back and Google these things on YouTube. But
did you watch the Penguin TV series?
I haven't seen that yet.
I've heard really good things. I've heard it's dark, but I've heard really good things. We actually watched one episode of it and then we fell off. But yeah, in the same Batman theme. Yeah. Now I want to watch The Dark Knight again too.
Well, the Batman TV series of the 60s still holds up.
Okay,
and it's in
good
color.
to know. Okay, there you go. There you go. It is hard when you were talking about your Frank Capra favorites. I'm like, it's a little hard to get me to watch a black and white. Bentley always wants to dig deep into the archives, but I like a challenge that way. So I can do a black and white movie. If it's one of your favorites, I can do it.
I believe in you.
Thank you. Okay, here's a good one. What's a question that you return to often?
So this one was the one I was worried would most bump up against our rules. But I think the question that I return to most often is, can humans create sustainable, meaningful community without organized religion? And I'm not talking about bowling leagues or hiking groups. I'm talking about the type of community where you're delivering casseroles to each other if someone's got cancer or a kid's sick, where you'll show up on a morning when all the planks of sod are there to then sod your, the lawn of your new house. And all of a sudden 20 people will show up and help you lay your sod in a matter of 30 minutes. Or like even the Harrison Ford movie Witness, where he's embedded with the Amish and they're going to do a barn raising because a barn burns down in the movie. And then all of a sudden, like the entire town, Amish town, shows up and raises an entire barn in a day. Like that type of community that's rich and meaningful and connective and in some ways salvific. I think my upbringing exemplified that in very positive ways. And ever since, things didn't work out with me in the tradition I was raised in, I've been trying to either find or help create replacement communities. And it's freaking hard.
It's really hard. Yeah. I mean, Britt Hartley talks a lot about this, right? So No Nonsense Spirituality, I can link her below. But she talks about just really on like an almost biological level, how difficult it is to unite people without that unifying belief, essentially. I felt similarly. I think that...
Do you miss church or not? Because
no.
Not everyone does. Introverts don't.
I would consider myself an extrovert. Here's my thing with the community, and let's go to our next section where Mormonism is allowed. Okay. So we can say Mormon now. We did it. We
didn't do it.
We did.
I failed
59
twice.
Minutes.
0 to 2. No, 2 to 0. Haley won.
59 minutes, everyone. Write it down. Word Radio, 59 minutes. John Dehlin, Haley roll. No Mormon spoken, except for twice. I feel like I do agree to an extent. I think the community of Mormonism for me was beautiful at times, but it oftentimes felt very duty bound. I remember feeling like a lot of burnout and overwhelm, like especially when I was in college and even in high school sometimes, like it felt like I have to go to church, I have to go to activities, and it's my job to go to support the people who plan the activities or to support the other girls who are going to the activities. So it felt a little bit more like I'd rather be with my friends or I'd rather be with my soccer team. Like I feel like I had community elsewhere in different ways. However, in the same breath, I mean, I grew up with my dad was out of the house by the time I was 13, and the church really was huge in supporting especially my mom, as she raised us. We always had that net to fall back on, which was absolutely huge to your point. So yeah, I definitely agree in a big way. I feel like there's got to be something that we can do. But to your point, I mean, you've tried probably more than anyone, especially for ex-Mormons, and you would know better than anyone the challenges that arise.
Yeah, we started this organization called Oasis, which was literally like secular Sunday church in 5 cities in Utah, 10-ish years ago. We did Logan, Salt Lake, Provo, Orem, Park City, and one other. And they lasted for a few months or a year. I think Salt Lake City Oasis still exists, but it hasn't really grown as I understand it. And Sunday Assembly has struggled, which was another secular church. It still exists, but it's not really taking off. And even Thrive, which still exists, and we've had a lot of cool, weekend events. It's all different than like, my story is similar to yours. My parents were divorced by middle school. My mom became a working single mom, and my dad was living in a totally different home. Well, guess what? The church raised me morally and socially and even spiritually, where there was always a dance or always a youth conference or dance festival or temple trip or Boy Scouts or whatever it was. The church raised me and helped me stay out of trouble, helped me stay focused, helped me feel like I had a sense of meaning and purpose. And even if it wasn't what it claimed to be, I still feel like so much of the good of who I am came from the community that kind of helped raise me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's different than a book club, which I love my book club.
Totally.
And in some ways, my book club's way better than church.
Totally.
So I don't mean to dismiss, there's WACA, Women of a Certain Age, which is a really, really cool support community for post-Mormon women in Utah and elsewhere, 40 and up, or Lost and Found Club, which is for kind of ex-Mormon women for the most part, and non-binary people. Those are incredible communities, and I don't want to say they're better, worse, or the same as a church experience.
No, but I see what you're saying. I mean, I think there's so many things about it, and I think the main thing, back to Brett Hartley's point, is like there's community in a lot of ways can really thrive on a certain sort of sameness. And I think that's always my biggest drawback with what the Mormon community did offer, was that there was a very high level of, at least for me, conformity that was demanded in order to fit into that community. However, if you're in, it's tight-knit and it's strong. And yeah, I definitely think that that's a very interesting question to explore, especially when you consider how important community is for wellness for human beings. Like, we know that community is important. And so I feel like that a lot of people find themselves in a place where they no longer believe the religion that I mean, a lot of people stay just for the community, and they think that they don't believe in any of the beliefs anymore, but the community is worth it for them, which I can completely understand, especially depending on life circumstances and phases of life and things like that.
Totally. Like, if you just think about like the Jewish community in the United States, at some point 40, 50, 60 years ago, it didn't matter if you believed in God. It didn't matter if you believed Moses existed. You still were Jewish, and you still were a part of your Jewish community, and you probably did bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah. They even had branches of Judaism like Reconstructionist Judaism or Reform Judaism, where you literally didn't need to believe anything, and you still did bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah. You still had some form of observance of the Shabbat or kosher, and because it benefited you to have identity, meaning, purpose, community, socially, even business-wise, you would do business with the people you were closest to. There's almost like a tribal benefit, like the book *Sapiens* by Yuval Noah Harari, and also a book he wrote later called *Nexus*. When you share heroes, when you share stories, when you share myths, when you share rituals, when you share an identity, you trust people. Sometimes that's a bad thing, but in many ways, it's a good thing, where you're able to trust and form community and build cool things like businesses, economies, cities, states, because you all share so many important things in common.
Absolutely.
So yeah, if I could have one wish for humanity, it would be that they could create something as powerful or more powerful in terms of community without the need for false, bigoted, or supernatural religious belief.
Yeah, amen. Maybe this leads a bit into this next question, which is, what do you think people assume about you that is totally wrong?
Yeah. Like you mentioned, Ward Radio or others like that, and just, the church has done a really good job after they excommunicate someone. That helps paint them as an enemy to the church. And so if you talk to any believing faithful Mormon that's heard of me or my podcast, it's he hates the church and he wants to tear the church down and he's, anti-Mormon, and that's just couldn't be further from the truth. I am not trying to tear down the LDS church. I don't hate the LDS church. I still have deep feelings of love and affection. Now, I say this acknowledging that I'm a man. And when I say this in front of Margie or Natasha or other women that I love and respect and see how they feel so deeply harmed by the church, and particularly by the patriarchy of the church, I realize that I lived a very different experience than women did. So you may feel differently. I do want to hear how you feel about this, but I'll just say I had a fantastic experience in the church as far as being a white, straight male goes. So I don't have feelings of hatred or animosity. And I don't believe that you wave a magic wand and then if the Mormon church or all religion goes away, the humanity is better. I think humanity is often better off with, that's a hot take. I think humanity is probably better off with churches and religion than if they had none of it, in spite of all the challenges and the flaws. So I only want to help make the LDS church more honest for those who want the truth, not for everyone, just the ones who care about truth. Lots of Mormons don't care about the truth.
Yeah,
don't
true.
want the truth, and I don't need them to know it.
Yeah,
but for
they
those
don't have to listen.
But for those who want the truth or want to learn it, one thing I want to do is that idea of informed consent. Those who want to know should be able to know. And then the other thing is I just want to see the church do less harm. So whether that's LGBT people, women, people of color, anti-science, anti-intellectual, anti-apostate, like I just want the church to do less harm.
Yeah.
So I don't hate the church and I don't want to bring it down and I don't hate religion and I don't want to make the world irreligious.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah, it's so interesting to think about just being ex-Mormon in any public capacity is such an interesting thing because it's very easy to upset everyone, because ex-Mormons get very upset and understandably so, as you just pointed out. If there is, I've had people be upset with me because I'm too harsh toward the church, and I've had a lot of people be upset with me because I'm not harsh enough. And I think that again, to your point, like I understand because I also have a lot of privilege in my upbringing in the church as well. And I think that that's important to point out. But I also think it's important thinking about you and your voice and how there are lots of different people talking about this now because, like I said, I think in huge part because of your work and what you've done. And I think it's really important that the different voices talking about this have different perspectives, and we don't all have to align perfectly on how we still relate to the Mormon church or on how we relate to religion. In fact, it's probably a really good thing that we don't. But oftentimes, as, is the case, I think just with human psychology, it's difficult to accept that, I guess, sometimes. I found as, being the person behind the mic where people will be like, yeah, you've helped me and I appreciate this and this, but this one thing I don't agree with you on. And then it's difficult for them. It's just difficult to disagree, maybe especially from a Mormon background. But all of that to say, I feel like me knowing you, that was my biggest misunderstanding of you, even when I was already out of the church, was what even Mormon Stories is about, which I don't think at all is about attempting to tear the church down at all. It is exactly what you said, which is shedding light on truth. And also, like you said, for the people who want it, you're sharing what you share and people are welcome to tune in or to tune out. How has it been having that assumption? Like, how do you feel personally knowing that people assume that about you? Is that a difficult thing for you?
Yeah, it makes me sad just because it's such a negative take. And, I've worked really hard to always have believers on the podcast, to try and have a neutral tone and to try and be responsible and ethical about it and to show multiple sides. Obviously, there's a self-fulfilling bias when they excommunicate you because so many believers, they literally covenant in the temple not to associate with anyone who's considered an apostate or an enemy of the church. So clearly there's a ton of faithful believing Mormons that literally just won't accept coming on the show because the church excommunicated me. So it's true that, Mormon Stories is going to weight. It's going to be weighted towards the critical side, but also because the church does such an overwhelmingly good job showing all the positive things that it would just be redundant for a podcast to be talking about all the good things about the church. Like, we're filling the void of like looking at the church with a critical eye. But even so, I've tried to be fair and objective. And most of that comes from people who just haven't listened. Like I was going to ask you, I rarely get like, oh, John, I was a total believing Mormon, and then I watched a 6-hour Mormon Stories episode and lost my faith. No believing Mormon's going to even stumble on Mormon Stories podcast, let alone listen to a 6-hour interview.
No. If anything, they'll see a clip on social media. If anything, yeah.
Yeah. I don't see Mormon Stories as leading people out of the church. For the most part, people have their own reasons for losing their faith in the church. And it's usually because they either feel the church hurt them or hurt someone they love, or the church became boring or irrelevant, or the church didn't teach them the truth. And then they found that out. And then once they were questioning or lost their faith and struggling, then Mormon Stories just helped them orient themselves, realize they weren't alone, realize they weren't crazy, and then help them transition in a healthy way.
Yes, they're seeking out,
What's it like with Girls Camp audience? I'm curious.
I feel very similarly. I think that, it's interesting because I think over the course of Girls Camp, when I first started, one of my really big priorities was objectivity and fairness. And I wouldn't even say that I don't prioritize that anymore. I think I even sometimes give myself less credit than I deserve in that arena. But I do feel like I now have the mentality that if you're listening to an episode of Girls Camp, like you're signing up to hear criticism of the church. And I've sort of let go this need to, I guess I just say what I think. And I do think a lot of quite negative things about the church. And so I just say it. And I'd be curious. I mean, it's difficult to track. As you know, I'd be curious like how my audience has evolved over time, because I do know for a period of time, at least, I would get people DMing me like, I'm an active member, but I listen, which really surprised me, even when I was trying to be maybe more careful, kind of thinking, okay, if an active member were listening, where now that's just not really a concern of mine. But I completely agree with you. I think, especially if you've been Mormon, like a podcaster is not going to is not going to lead you out of the Mormon church. If you believe it, I think it almost always has to come from the person themselves. I think there's people who kind of, leave and come back, and there's all sorts of ways that can pan out. But I do think for the most part, it's similar, where people are questioning and then they feel alone and they feel crazy, and they're looking for voices to say, you're not alone and you're not crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the joys now that I receive is just people who come up to me and say, I love your show. I listen to every episode. I used to think you were evil and I wouldn't listen. And then X happened. And then I tried listening, and they're always like, whoa, he's actually really nice. And he's actually really fair and kind of positive. And
absolutely.
I love it when people have that. I mean, again, because just like Mormon apologetics often leads people out of the church because the justifications for the harm or the bad history are just so bad.
And they're also quite rude, might I add.
Yeah. Hateful.
Not all of them, but
some of them, yeah.
Yeah, some of them.
But then also just, when somebody is told I'm John Dehlin is evil, and then they actually listen and I don't come across that way.
Yeah.
Then they feel lied to.
Yeah. I mean, even if we're looking at plenty of episodes you've done, I feel like I could have active family members or friends listen to, and they probably wouldn't even bristle, So I think it is interesting. And I think just goes to show, especially we were talking about this before we started recording, but especially at the time you started, how new criticism of the church was in a public way, how much Mormon Stories has done and uncovered. I think that, there just is a connotation that is absolutely untrue. But to your point, I think there's a lot of peace in knowing, this is kind of the theme of my therapy journey this year, is like, no one really knows you, unless except for the people who take the time. And it's kind of nice in a way, I've found, to learn to be misunderstood because it's just like, if people are saying John Dehlin is evil, like they're obviously wrong. And not that it doesn't still hurt, but it's just like, you kind of realize you can't please them all. And there's something liberating about that, I found, at least.
It's also fun to see the church come around to our side, because if you look at the church in 2004 versus the church, which is, when the blogs came out, and then 2005 when Mormon Stories started, compared to 2025, the church has changed its stance on LGBT people. It's become more favorable for women. It's come out with the gospel topics essays.
There's tank tops now.
It's history. And then garments.
Yeah, huge.
I would just say with you, I was going to ask you this, not only do I not think of us as enemies to the Mormon church or Mormonism, the church is still wildly successful. It's a $300 billion organization that's going to be a $1 trillion organization in 30 years. Mm-hmm. We're not killing the Mormon church. Mm-hmm. It's not going away. I wouldn't even say that people are leaving the church in any exponential way. I think there's a steady flow of people out of the church, but not exponential growth. If you had to, my opinion is, the most significant impact we, meaning you, Girls Camp, me, Mormon Stories, everyone else has on the church is in improving it. Because the church is listening to podcasts and YouTube channels and TikTok channels like ours. And, they'll come out with a stupid lesson for children on polygamy, 5 or 6 months ago. And then what? We all do our reactions to it.
There's an uproar, yeah.
A couple months later, they take that lesson away.
Yeah.
We talk about how your podcast talks about how awful garments are for women, how oppressive they are, frumpy, bad for the sex life, whatever. Lo and behold, the church comes out with improved garments. Don't you feel like we're, in effect, improving the Mormon church?
Yeah, that's a super hot take, and I like it. It's funny because, yes. I mean, to your point, I would hope so. And I do think that is hopefully a byproduct of the criticism that the church receives. I think that
it's not revelation.
Yeah. They're listening to a couple episodes of, they're
Girls
typing
Camp.
on YouTube, Mormon Stories. I think that the one thing that I do wonder if this is happening, and I'm probably biased, but I do think that even despite changes, I feel like with so much, and again, maybe I'm biased, I feel like there's a lot of bad publicity for the church, more and more. And I feel like it might be creating a more fringe type of religion, or people within the religion are digging their heels in more and kind of swinging the pendulum back to feeling more extreme. And that, is obviously could be debated because the church is making changes like tank top garments. I still can't believe it. I never thought I would see the day.
Be in.
Yeah,
You'd
seriously.
still be in the church.
They missed me by 5 years. I would have stayed. Give me a tank top garment. But I do sometimes worry that as the public outcry is more intense, that the people within the religion become even increasingly, they feel that everyone else is even more other. You know what I mean? And it kind of it kind of might exacerbate what I already think is a dynamic in any religion, especially high demand religions of us versus them.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not even necessarily, to your question, maybe relevant, because either way, Church HQ is listening to some extent, So, yeah,
and
look at us.
there's always been cycles of retrenchment where a more fundamentalist or conservative version of Mormonism reacts to the church making changes. There's a book called The Angel in the Beehive by a Mormon scholar named Armin Moss that talks about assimilation and retrenchment, and assimilation and retrenchment. The church has always done that. It's polygamist. It's not polygamist, and then it is, and then it's not again, and then it's, it's super white male, and then it's not, and then it's doubles down on the truth claims, and then it sort of loosens up.
Yeah.
It's harsher on gay people, and then it's more friendly. The church is always going to be oscillating.
Yeah.
But even the more neo-fundamentalist types that are right now surging, at some point the church is gonna clamp down on them and
they'll have to. Yeah,
there'll be scandals, there'll be apostate groups and polygamy again in different ways, and the church will shut that down. And but the church is, if that's the weird, brilliant mind trick that the church has sort of successfully conveyed upon all its members. All the members think the church never changes, and the gospel is unchanging. And yet the gift and the genius of Mormonism is that it's constantly changing.
Constantly changing.
Well, all the members will say the church never changes based on social pressure. And the secret is it's always changing based on social pressure.
Yeah. And then a very interesting note that a lot of times that social pressure is coming from ex-Mormons.
Absolutely.
So if you're wearing your tank top garments, ladies,
thank Haley.
You might have both of us to thank.
Thank Girls Camp.
Thank you, John. This was so lovely. It's so fun to get to know these different sides of you, to talk shop, because we got to talk a little shop, of course, when two post-Mormon podcasters are together. And I just so appreciate, I truly, like I said, when you came up in conversation the other day, I was just saying, I feel like from day one of me starting the podcast, I have always felt your mentorship, your support. You've always been willing to boost Girls Camp wherever you can. I think it's made a huge difference in my success, and I just really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for having me on. I love what you're doing. And I just have to say, like, I don't want to do this forever. I never wanted to do this to start with. And I'm just so thrilled at what you and Girls Camp have done. How long has it been now?
Almost 3 years. Well,
3
2.5
years!
Crazy, right?
Like, I always say when people ask, like, my superpower, it's that I didn't quit. Very few people ever start a Mormon-themed sort of social media project. But to have it last 3 years, nobody understands how hard it is to do this for 1 year, let alone 3.
Thank you.
Are you surviving?
I appreciate that. I am surviving.
Is it
I'm in
hard?
therapy.
Isn't it incredibly grueling?
It's really grueling. And I think I'm at a stage where I'm proud of myself because I'm figuring out boundaries, and I'm realizing the things I need to do to make it sustainable, because I love it. I want to do it. I really do, but I want it to be sustainable for me and my mental health and my family. So I do very much appreciate you saying that, because it's unique. I mean, it's hard to relate unless you're doing the exact same thing, which I feel like we're doing very similar things. So it's meant a lot to me to have that. And yeah, I mean, 21 years.
Well, I mean, just think about it. Like, social YouTube and podcasting has been around about 20 years, and less than 20 people have had a podcast or a YouTube channel last more than 3 years. Like, you're in a very small elite group of people. But you've also, I just love the casualness, the conversational nature, and the spirit and the creativity of what you do is a totally refreshing new take that we have not had and don't have.
Thanks.
So I just love your place. And now I can go away. So I'm going to go away. Today is my last
Mormon Stories might get a lot more girl chatty if I ended up in there. No, thank you, John. I so appreciate it. I so appreciate those words. And thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Talk next week. Bye.
Support Girls Camp.
Woo!
GR